and while we haven't tested this international variant, we do expect it to perform the same. In this review, we will start by looking at the design of the TV and then go on to our test results. We will look at the picture quality, motion handling, input lag, and sound performance before comparing to other competing TVs. If you'd like to skip ahead, then check out the links in the description down below. The design of the Q90 is impressive. At a glance, it looks like the screen is floating. The stand is a very heavy component as it's made of solid metal, so it feels well built and is very sturdy. The controls are located on the front of the TV under the Samsung logo, and the buttons act as a four-way joystick, which is fairly easy to use. The Q90R also has the same One Connect box found on many other high-end Samsungs. It allows you to plug all inputs and power into this external box, which can be placed far away from the TV. Only a relatively thin cable connects to the screen, so it helps to keep cables out of sight. The borders of the TV are also thin and look good. Moving around to the rear, the TV is very thin. It also supports Samsung's no-gap wall mount, so it can sit almost flush to the wall, which is great. The back of the TV has a textured finish, which looks good. There is only a single connection for the One Connect cable. On the One Connect box, there are 4 HDMI inputs. The fourth one performs a bit differently to the others and may support HDMI 2.1 in the future, as we'll talk about later. There are also 3 USB ports on the side and a tuner. Now, if we look at a thermal image of the TV, we can see the One Connect box puts out quite a bit of heat. This isn't a problem, but it is a result of the power supply and external electronic components. Overall, because many of the components are external, the screen itself doesn't get too warm. So we'll now move on to our picture quality tests. We'll be comparing to currently available TVs, but the competition will change as new models are released throughout the year. For an updated comparison with new models as we buy and test them, see the review page on the website, which is linked below. We'll start with the contrast ratio. A high native contrast is important to produce deep blacks, especially in scenes that local dimming isn't as effective. This tends to be scenes with bright and dark areas close together. The Q90R does have a high native contrast ratio, so it can produce deep dark scenes. At just over 3000 to 1, it's within the lower end of the typical range of V8 type panels. It is lower than the Q9FN from last year, but this really isn't very noticeable in most content due to the effective local dimming. We have done multiple measurements of the native contrast of these TVs at different backlight levels to confirm this difference. The contrast is much better than the Z9F, which is very interesting because both of these TVs have an additional optical layer to improve viewing angles. We've found in the past that this layer results in a lower native contrast, but for this TV, it doesn't seem to have as much of a negative effect. Now, local dimming is also very important to produce deep dark scenes. The Q90R has very good local dimming with a large number of zones. The algorithm is quite interesting as it heavily prioritizes reducing blooming. This means that in an effort to darken dark areas, the TV also causes a type of vignetting around bright areas. In extreme cases, this can cause a loss of very small details in dark scenes. When watching content with subtitles, and especially in HDR, changing brightness around the subtitles is visible, especially in the dark. This can be very distracting. Also, as we'll see later, the TV has very good black levels off-axis, so the telltale blooming at an angle isn't very noticeable when comparing the Q90 side by side with other local dimming TVs or when viewing our video. Like other new Samsung TVs, local dimming can't be disabled through the normal settings menu. This means that those who dislike the downsides of local dimming have no way to prevent this. Having said that, if you're buying this flagship model, then you probably don't plan to disable one of its distinguishing features. So now onto the reflection handling. If you're in a bright room, then good reflection handling is important. The Q90R offers excellent performance. Reflections are decreased significantly thanks to the anti-glare coating, which results in the lowest total reflections number that we've measured. The indirect reflections is a bit higher than some of the competition, and we expect that this is a result of the additional viewing angle optical layer, which causes horizontal smearing of reflections, as seen in the photo. Now, another important factor for those in a room with a lot of light is how bright the TV can get. We measure the peak brightness of every TV on a real scene test pattern, as well as on different sized white windows. The Q90R can get very bright, and combined with the excellent reflective coating, it shouldn't have any issues, even in very bright environments. Note that you can turn down the backlight for those who want a darker image, so there is no downside to this high peak brightness. If you watch a lot of HDR content, then a high peak brightness is also important to produce highlights that stand out. We measure this in a similar way to the SDR brightness, but this time with an HDR signal. Our real scene measurement corresponds most closely to what you can experience with bright highlights in real content, but we also measure a range of window sizes. The TV is able to produce bright highlights, which is excellent. Compared to last year's Q9FN, the older model is able to produce brighter white rectangles, but this year's TV produces a brighter highlight in our real scene. It is a bit strange that they perform differently, but may be due to the different tone mapping in HDR. Now, if you watch HDR content, then a wide color gamut is important to produce vivid highlights to match as close as possible to the mastering process and the director's intent. Like most other QLEDs, the Q90R is able to produce very saturated colors, and it's in the same ballpark as the Sony Z9F or Samsung Q6FN. It isn't as wide as the Q9FN from last year, and we don't know if this is a result of the additional viewing angle layer. We found the Q900R with a similar layer to also have slightly less wide color gamut. Overall, it is still enough to make highlights pop, which is great. We also measure the EOTF, or electro-optical transfer function, of each HDR TV. This measurement shows how the brightness of the TV changes depending on the signal level or stimulus. The yellow line in this plot is the reference PQ curve, or the brightness that an ideal TV should follow. This reference line is unachievable by any TV at the moment though, so every TV has a way to tone map the input signal to the display's capabilities. We can see that the Q90R exceeds the reference yellow curve for much of the input range, which some people might like as it produces a brighter image with more pop. This is a problem for video enthusiasts though, as it doesn't correspond to how the image was mastered. Now, if you sometimes watch from an angle or have a wide seating arrangement, then good viewing angles are important to ensure an accurate image off-axis. To help with this, the Q90R has an additional optical layer in front of the VA-type LCD layer. This optical layer isn't really noticeable, but you can see that it adds distortion when we take a photo of the pixels. The effect of it though is very interesting. We measure the image accuracy at 10-degree angle increments, and the viewing angles of this TV are better than almost all TVs we've tested with the same VA type. The image continues to maintain a very similar gamma for wide angles, and the colors don't change much. The blacks also remain deep, which is great. Overall, the performance is more similar to IPS-type TVs, and this is a good pick for those who have wide seating. If you watch sports or play games, then a uniform screen is important to prevent distracting areas known as the dirty screen effect. Unfortunately, this is one area that the Q90 underperforms in, as dirty screen effect is noticeable. Note that this does vary between units due to tolerances in the manufacturing process, so we don't know how other units compare. But we did have similar results with the Q9FN we bought last year and the Q900R from this year. Let us know if you buy either of these TVs, and if so, how yours compares. This is interesting because we've found that the cheaper edge-lit Samsung TVs tend to have better uniformity with less dirty screen effect. This is likely due to the different way that these TVs are constructed. We'll now move on to our motion tests. If you want to learn more about motion on TVs, then see our video series, which is linked down below. For those who watch sports or game, a fast response time is important to reduce the amount of motion smearing. The Q90R has a very fast response time, which is typical of many new LCD TVs. This is excellent and results in clear motion without much blur trail. This small amount of smearing is visible on the left-hand side of our moving logo photo as a slightly darker region. If you want the lowest amount of blur when gaming, then this TV also has the option to adjust the flicker of the backlight, a feature known as black frame insertion. It works well, as this TV can flicker at 60 FPS, which is good for avoiding blur or duplications with most 60 FPS games. The effect of this is clear when looking again at our moving logo photo. Now, the TV has 4 HDMI inputs, but they don't all perform the same. The first 3 inputs support HDMI 2.0 full bandwidth. The fourth input also supports a 4K signal at 120 Hz, which is excellent for PC gamers. This is supported via the bandwidth of HDMI 2.0 as it uses an 8-bit signal with chroma subsampling, but it may also indicate that this fourth input could be certified for higher bandwidth signals like HDMI 2.1 in the future. Unfortunately, there aren't any HDMI 2.1 sources yet to test this, but we will do this as soon as a source becomes available for us to buy. A low input lag is also important to reduce the time between an action in-game and when you see it on the screen. Like most other Samsung TVs, the Q90 has a very low input lag at about 15 milliseconds for 60 Hz content. This is excellent and in line with the best TVs we've tested. There is also the option to interpolate low frame rate content while keeping input lag low, which many people like for low frame rate games and is currently a feature unique to high-end Samsungs. This adds some input lag, but results in a much smoother image. The TV also supports automatic low latency mode, which is a neat feature that allows the TV to change automatically to game mode when this Xbox or another console triggers it when a game opens. High-end Samsung models are also currently the only TVs that have a variable refresh rate feature. This feature allows the display to keep in synchronization with the changing frame rate of demanding games. It is useful for gamers on a new Xbox or a PC with FreeSync support and prevents screen tearing. It works well and doesn't cause a change in the amount of input lag, which is great. Now, this TV has the same Tizen-based smart platform as other Samsung TVs. It's very intuitive and easy to use, as everything can be accessed from the home bar on the bottom of the screen. The remote also works well with it and is very simple, but provides a lot of functionality. There is also a Bixby voice assistant which works well. It's a bit faster than previous Samsung TVs, which is nice. Unfortunately though, like many new TVs, there can be ads in the smart platform, including the home screen. Whether you see ads depends on if someone is paying to advertise to you, so you might have different results. Now for the sound. The Q90 can get quite loud, which is good, and has some punch to the bass, but lacks a deep thump or rumble. As with most TVs, if you care about sound, then an external soundbar or speakers is the way to go. So overall, the Samsung Q90R is a very interesting TV. There have been a few TVs which have tried to improve the viewing angles of